Okay, in this video, I'm going to take a look at creating some of the Automata standardized parts that I use in the box creation. And I'm just going to go ahead and create all these in one video. And I'm just going to create these in separate design files. So I went ahead and opened up a new design file. I do have a folder in here with the Automata design. Now I want to create separate design files. We created multiple parts in the Automata design, but I want to do these kind of separate components. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to close this down. And I want to go ahead and say new component in this new and untitled design file, and I'm going to go ahead and call this axle, and I'll say OK. And with the axle, I want to go ahead and create a sketch. I'm going to choose this work plane and center rectangle at the origin. Now this is 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch square stock, and I'm going to go ahead and say finish sketch. And then typically in your Automata box kits that PLTW provides, they have about 7 inches, or if you have longer, you usually want to cut this down to around 7 inches, and you may want to go shorter or anything like that. We'll see it as we put it in the design file. This is a typical value I usually have, and I'm going to go ahead and say OK. For my physical material, I'm going to go ahead and add pine in there, and I use some pine and stuff like that for some of these cases, maybe even like a southern pine or something like that, but any one of those will work. And I want to go ahead and say save, and I want to name this axle and say save. Now again, I'm going to do a combination of top down and bottom up with this box. So I'm going to create a new design by clicking a plus sign, new component. This one here, I'm going to create the follower, and I'm going to go ahead and say OK. Create a new sketch. Very similar to how we did the axle. I'm going to do a center point rectangle. Now the followers, you also have, I'm going to do 3/16 on these and hit enter. And you'll see there's 3/16 being applied. I can say finish sketch because that's the other size of stock you have available. Depends on what you're wanting to do. Sometimes with my students, this is going to be extruded out at 4 inches, but sometimes I just have them use the 1/4 inch stock even for their followers. Makes it a little bit more sturdy, and that goes through and helps out. So I'm going to go ahead and apply the pine material that I had in that case, and everything will look good. And I'm going to say close. And I'm going to go ahead and hit save. We'll call this follower. Okay, new design file. So the next part I'm going to create is in the new with a new component is I'm going to call this the axle bushing, and I'm going to create a new sketch. I'm going to use the bottom work plane, and what this is going to be a bushing that I put on to help the axle stay kind of in place. So the diameter of this is going to be 0.75, and I'm going to go ahead and say finish sketch. I'm going to extrude. The extrusion height is going to be 3/16. There we go. And I'm going to create a new sketch on top of that cylinder that I just created. The diameter of this one, 0.47. I'm going to extrude the sketch, and the height on this is going to be 0.375. And I'm going to go ahead and say OK. The only other thing that I need to add, so I'm going to create a new sketch on the top face. From the center, I'm going to use a center rectangle. And for the axle, we won't need to have some tolerance values. So we want 0.26 by 0.26. So even though the 1/4 inch stock is going to go in there, we want that tolerance to be kind of an interference fit. Extrude, I'm going to cut down, and on the cut, I'm going to say distance all, and that cuts all the way through the part. And then that's going to be our axle bushing. For this one, when you go to look at physical material, I'm going to be 3D printing a lot of these. So if you find, here's plastic, an ABS plastic, if you drag that over, and then if I want to add a physical appearance to it, I can use paint as a color, and let's say I want to use blue. So there we're going to be creating blue followers, or full axle bushings for our axle. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit save. This will be axle bushing, and I'm going to say and save that one. Okay, I'm going to create a new design file, And this one, I'm going to create a new component, and I'm going to call this one the roller. Say OK. I'm going to create a new sketch, and I'm going to choose the front plane. And to start off with, I'm going to do a center rectangle, and I'm going to create this little rectangle like this. Now, in this case, we're going to have a height of 0.0625 or a 1/16 of an inch, and then the width of this you're going to see is actually going to be around a value of 0.3125. And when I zoom in here, so you'll notice these parts are kind of small. And then what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to use a 3-point arc and draw this, and the arc is going to also become part of the roller. So here I can create a sketch dimension. Now, the only thing is I think I need to go through and make an adjustment. So the radius on this is actually going to be 0.3125, and you can see it's going to go through and kind of adjust that as well. So as I take a look at my drawings that I have, I want to go through actually. I misinterpreted this wrong. This actually needs to be 0.625. There we go. And that's going to be what we're going to use for our value. So there's what we're kind of looking for. A lot better look to our file. I'm going to say finish the sketch. And what I'm going to end up seeing here is I'm going to extrude. I'm going to choose both profiles. And this is going to be another 0.625. So it's kind of like a squarish kind of top to it. And I'm going to say OK. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new sketch on the top. And from our, with a center point rectangle, I'm going to go ahead and I can choose, I want to make sure I get the midpoint. So I'm going to go over and just touch the midpoint so you can see it's an X noted by a triangle. I'm going to line this up, and I'm going to do the same thing with touching this top line as well. And then there I can get right in the center. So you'll see the two blue lines. Draw this. This is going to be 3/16 square. And I'm going to go ahead and throw a horizontal vertical with the origin and the center point. And here, if you notice, I can still move up and down. So maybe I want to go through and throw a horizontal vertical along this edge. If I hold the shift key, I can find that midpoint. It's noted by an X, and I can click the center point, and that'll constrain that as well. I'm going to say finish sketch, and then the depth of our hole is 0.1875, so negative 0.1875, and say OK. And there's our roller, and we can go ahead and add in ABS plastic, and for our appearance, we'll make these, let's say we'll make these black, and close. Okay, so save, and here is our roller. All right, two more parts. New design, create a new sketch, front face. I'm going to create the crank handle next. So I'm going to use a center diameter circle on the origin. That diameter is going to be 0.625. And along the same lines, I'm going to go ahead and draw another circle. I'm going to go ahead and just touch the center point to help keep me kind of locked in. And the diameter on this one is going to be 5/16. And what I'm going to have here is I'm going to use the sketch dimension tool, clicking on the centers. These are 1.5 centered. And then I'm going to also make sure horizontal vertical, choosing the center point of the two circles, and that'll help lock them into place. And then I'm going to take the line tool, clicking off the top edge of this circle to this one, and then from this one to this one. Now I'm going to use the tangent geometric constraint by clicking on the line, clicking to the circle, clicking on the line, clicking to the second circle. Same thing here on the bottom. Okay, I can also go there and use the trim tool and trim away the insides of the circles that I don't need. While I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and put a center point rectangle right here. So this is going to be where the axle is going to fit on, and this is going to be a 0.26 by 0.26 hole there. And I'm going to go ahead and say finish sketch. What I'm going to do is I'm going to extrude. The extrusion on this, I'm going to choose just, and that's going to be 0.25, so I'm going to choose right there, leaving that open. And then the only other thing I'm going to do is create a new sketch, choosing the top face. And now I'm going to go ahead and put the little handle here. I can click on center diameter circle. Now if you notice, I'm not really getting, or here I can get a center point, and I can snap here. If I need to, I can always dimension. This is going to be 5/16, and that'll help with our measurement there. And we're fully constrained. I'm going to say finish sketch. And then I can extrude. This is going to be extruded out a 1/2 inch. Now, one thing that I've noticed as I've been creating some things here, is I forgot to create this as a component, and I want to make sure that it's a component. And if you ever forget to, as you start modeling like what I've done, let me go ahead and apply the physical material first. But what I can end up doing is I can go ahead and create this as a component. So right now this is created as a body, so you'll notice here's body 1. So I'm going to go ahead and say new component. And here, instead of empty component, I'm going to say from bodies, and I'm going to choose body 1, and I'm going to say OK. And now it's named component 1. So if I click on it, wait a second, click again, I'm going to call this the crank, hit enter, and there's our part. I'm going to hit the save button. We'll call this crank. All right, our very last component is going to be a follower guide. So here I'm going to say new component, follower guide, create a new sketch choosing the bottom plane, and I'm going to create a circle that is a 1/2 inch in diameter, aligned to the origin. I'm going to finish the sketch, and then the thickness in this case is going to be 3/16. And I'm going to say OK. Now I'm going to utilize a loft command to create the next couple parts. So I'm going to choose this top face of the cylinder we just created. I'm going to sketch another circle at 0.75 diameter. I'm going to say finish sketch. Now in order to create a loft, I need a second sketch. So I'm going to go up here to construct, and I'm going to do an offset plane, choosing the top face, and I want to go to a height of 1 inch. I want to do an offset of 1 inch. I'm going to create a new sketch, choosing that work plane. I'm going to create a second circle at the origin, 0.5, and I'm going to say finish the sketch. So there's what I have, 2 sketches to be created. And I'm going to go ahead and choose the loft command. I'm going to choose this circle, and then I'm going to choose both. Make sure you highlight, get both profiles down there at the bottom, and make sure it's set to join, and I'm going to say OK. There's our loft. The only thing I'm going to do is create a new sketch, choose the top face. This one here is going to have I'm going to do a center point rectangle at the origin. This is going to be 0.215 by 0.215 for our follower guide, for our follower. And I'm going to finish the sketch, extrude, cut all the way through, and say OK. And the last thing is adding in our appearance, ABS plastic, and we'll make these red, just so that way these kind of stand out. Okay, save, and we will call this follower guide. All right, so this video was kind of a quick run through of how to create standardized parts for your automata, and in the next video we're going to take a look at how to incorporate these parts into your automata design file and start creating some motion with these.